and welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. I like how kind of like sing-songy did that one today. The show where we talk about some of the crazy stupid marketing stuff that's happening in the industry nowadays and how we cannot do that and do some good, fundamental, intelligent, intentional marketing efforts instead of crazy stupid things to say we checked a box and did marketing things. So here's something unique about the show, if you're joining us for the first time, is that this is an exploratory conversation zone, which means by the end of our 1 hour together, it's not that we're necessarily going to have answered one specific question, especially on our topic today, which is like pretty broad. But the point is to get into conversations that allow us to try on our perspectives, to learn new perspectives, and help move us forward towards the things that make sense for us. And I'm very excited about this topic today, and I have no idea where it's going to go. So if you guys are watching live, let us know. First of all, let us know that you are here. Hello, everybody. Secondly, if you have specific questions or specific themes along the marketing ethics arena that you would like for us to explore today, please let us know, because Tracy and Laura could talk about marketing ethics, and I'm sure AI is going to come up in that for an extremely long time. All the philosophizers are going to come out today for this conversation. Yes, that was a Bill and Ted's reference. If you guys picked up on that, good job, you. If not, and you have no idea who Bill and Ted are, it's also fine. You can still participate in the conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I am Tracy Borison. And what do I care about? Authenticity. So I care about authenticity in marketing. I care about authenticity as humans. I care about doing the right thing. What is doing the right thing? Who decides what is doing the right thing? Hence why we're having a conversation about marketing ethics. And when I thought about having a conversation about marketing ethics, I thought of no other person than the lovely Laura Miller. So hence why she is joining us here today. Where's my hand? It's there. So before we jump into the conversation and fly above all of the heads, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work that you've done to date in the ethics arena?
Sure. So my name is Laura Miller, and I am an AI ethicist. Now, when I say that, I should be clear. I did not come from technology and then suddenly go, oh, maybe we should make it behave. I'm an ethics first ethicist. So in other words, I fell in love with ethics first. That doesn't mean I love technology less. You can love two things at the same time, even equally, even children. So it works. I have two children, so there you go. So we also might
That's
have
what we tell the children anyways.
So here's the deal. So what does it mean when I say I'm an AI ethicist? Well, look, most developers, I'll say the majority, 99.9, I'm sure there's that 1% we have to leave that out there in case, really want to create phenomenal and amazing things that can do great things in our world. I haven't really met one who is like, I hope I bring about the end of it all. Like, that's really not a life goal. Okay. Now, what ethics does when it's done, the way that I see it should be done, is that it should help make that happen. It should help try to bring about those wonderful ideals that the developers had when they first thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go all in on that. But we have to be careful, because when it comes down to creating technology that can do incredible things, there's kind of like a double-edged sword. And you have to precariously balance on the edge and try not to fall off either one. If you fall off one way, you don't create that really incredible thing. If you go off the other way, you can create something really incredible, but it can do things you never intended them to do. And that can kind of cause some trouble for the rest of us out here, ethicists and non-ethicists, and, well, children alike. There's two downstairs. It's a snow day. So when I talk about doing AI ethics, I'm talking about looking at technology and trying to really bring about those developer visions for good that they had before. Well, they probably thought about the profit at the same time, but at the same time as profit, it doesn't have to be opposed to creativity. I was actually an artist before I ever, well, art ran me headfirst into philosophy. That's kind of confusing, but we'll get there. But I've been a creative. I know what that feels like, and I know what that excitement is. And what it's like when it's like, yes, that's the idea. I don't want to quash that. I don't want to make that not happen, but I want to be careful with it because I know that there's a precipice on both sides or a cliff, and I've got to be really careful when I'm walking the edge of that cliff. So if you go on my website, nextgenethics.com, there's a page and it's called The Ethical Edge. And it's that edge that you have to walk in order to get the maximum benefit from technology while avoiding the pitfalls that are waiting for you. And they're always there. You can't develop something incredible and not kind of get both sides of the sword. It's just the way that it works. So how do I do that? Well, good news. Ethics makes us study logic. So we can use logic to make sense out of what people are saying, make sure they're not skipping steps, haven't missed a step in their understanding of how this works or how the pitfalls will work. Sometimes we want to gloss over some things and take the rosy view. Logic kind of doesn't let you do that because it's like, no, you have to fill in those 4 gaps you just skipped. And you have to actually say the quiet part out loud, even if you don't like it and it makes you comfortable, because I can't help you design around it if you won't even say it. So we use logic, and logic is what sets us apart from psychology and sociology and all of those. It's logic, it's ordered thinking, it's doing logic puzzles using computers. That's what formal logic was for me in my program. So we have to really use our minds to really put it to creative use and critical thinking to really harness this kind of technology and this kind of good. And you can apply those same kinds of ideas to, well, marketing. You can apply it to HR. You can apply it to DEI. You can apply ethics to anything that you're doing, because if you're going to impact others or even yourself, ethics is on the line. And it's already there and part of it. So a little bit of a long-winded overview, but that's where I'm at for today.
Okay, so there are a lot of things you touched on there that I want to dive into, but there's this like screaming question in my mind that I feel like is the place we need to start, and mostly just because this is my personal brand. Okay, so when I think about ethics, think about Jurassic Park.
You think about what?
Jurassic Park.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so I know Jurassic Park is not real, folks, as much as sometimes I wish it was real. And the quote in there about how we were so busy thinking if we could, we didn't stop and think about whether or not we should. Yes. And so where is this should play along that like ethical edge that you were talking about?
That could and should is that ethical edge. If you step one side, you could. And if you go on the other side, you're going to be wondering if you should. So you really are walking that edge when you're thinking about could or should. But part of what decides whether just because you can, if you should, are asking those questions and filling in those blanks that make you uncomfortable. If you're suddenly like, yeah, this is a really good idea. What about this? I don't want to think about that. If you find yourself doing that, that's the stuff that you actually really need to explore. The easy wins, the easy benefits, some of those are going to be really straightforward, and they're just going to come to you rapid fire. Like, this is great because it can do this and it can do that and it can do this and it can do the other. And you're like, yeah, well, what if it does this? Yeah, well, there's a 1 in a whatever chance. We're not going to, if you start doing that, first of all, you've underestimated people's creativity and willingness to make it do the things that you really don't want it to, that it really shouldn't do. And there are plenty of people out there trying to break technology all the time to make it do all sorts of things that the developers have really hoped that they've created it so that it won't do it. And then all of a sudden people are, engineering prompts in order to try to make it give up training sets and having all sorts of fun stuff to make it break the rules. So we have to understand that while it might be a far-fetched wild card, okay, we have those people there. It's not quite the same as a flying cow. This is actually something that could happen. Right. So we really do have to use, and that's philosophy's strong point, is really figuring out what the right questions are and really making sure that we're not avoiding them because we don't have the answer or because they're inconvenient or because we don't like the answer and we do know it. So we really have to figure out how to ask those questions and have that conversation to root out those things, so that we can find solutions for them before they happen. That keeps you on the right side of the edge, the safe side.
Well, and I think this is why I love the topic of today, marketing ethics, because I think in a lot of spaces where there are a lot of rules, right? Hard program rules, which is, I mean, AI doesn't really have that yet, right? There's just forming rules.
Well, regular
that goes.
people have ideas about rules, but there's multiple of them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they really are.
And so I think, so let's talk about this. From an ethical point of view, how personal is that? Because if I'm trying to walk my edge,
Right?
is my edge different than your edge? Probably. But then is there like a cliff edge? And then I'm thinking of like when I went to the Cliffs of Moher in
Right.
Ireland, and there's like the edge of the cliff where if you go past it, you will perish. And then there's the fence,
Right.
which is like way back from
Right.
the cliff.
The edge.
So right. And so people who are nervous about the edge stay behind the fence.
Right.
But there are a whole bunch of people
He'll go sit on the edge.
right.
They'll climb the fence, go up to the edge, sit on it, take out their phone, and make it look like they're dangling off the cliff, and take their photo while they're left dangling, hopefully with their partner holding on to them for dear life.
Well, and like when I was there, I was worried we were going to leave without my father-in-law because he was going so close to the edge, and it's windy up there. So if we look at that from like, we have this fence, maybe that's the rules, and then we have this actual edge, which is where we're going into, we shouldn't do that. How do we identify those two zones so we can safely play in the middle?
Well, you see, the trick is when you're doing ethics, it's kind of complicated. It's not a popularity contest. It's not what everybody ever wants is the rule. So if a bunch of people want to dangle off the cliff, we just let them because they want to, because we still recognize plunging is bad, right? But at the same time, we also recognize that the fence, as you pointed out, might be set very securely for far back. People's risk tolerance does vary. But what we will notice when we start looking at things, even if we start looking at stuff like they call them ethical frameworks, which are these guidelines and these words that give us concepts that we're supposed to apply to our work in ethics, there's a lot of similarity there. The fence is designed to keep you safe. We know that the edge is dangerous. Yeah, do some people like to flirt with danger? Yes. Do we think that they necessarily want to choose that moment to have something go horribly, horribly wrong with the cliff? Not so much. So if we recognize that in the end, we all really do want to be saved from going over the edge, then we can start building some commonality around that. And we can give some people a little bit of a buffer. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but in some places they'll have a fence and then they'll have a second fence. Then they'll have signs on the second fence. Then they'll have signs beyond the second fence that say, do not go here. Then they'll have things like risk of falling or collapse signs posted there. So that for the people who want to push those lines, they are getting repeatedly warned that you are getting to we cannot guarantee your safety anymore. You know, so it's not like there has to be this one line and this one place. You know, depending on the kind of projects you're going to do in marketing, depending what technology you're going to use in marketing, depending on who you're reaching out to in marketing, will set the parameters and set the criteria for where we're going to put those fences. But yes, if I'm making fences, I'm adding signs and I'm adding cautions and I'm adding danger zones and I'm reminding people and I'm putting up, you know, like bells and whistles and everything I can think of to say you're way too close to the edge now. You know, so there is going to be some flexibility in there, but we have to recognize that the overarching theme or aim is still consistent. Nobody wants to go over the edge. So how that looks and what that looks like, as well as gauging how likely people are to go over the edge and taking that into consideration, matters too. I saw a sign once and it said something like, it was a joke. It was like steep fall, you know, and it was a pothole that was like 2 inches deep. Somebody moved a sign as a joke.
Right.
Now, we can't be doing that because that's going to signal the wrong thing. Then people aren't going to trust us because you're like, danger is here. And you're like, no, there's not. What's up? So we have to make sure that what we say matters and that we do say what matters. But we can look for those themes, which is in marketing, we might be considering a theme like privacy. We have to uphold privacy. Depending on what work you're doing, where the violations of privacy could occur might be different. So your guardrails or your fences are going to be differently placed, but you're all still looking out for privacy. So if you recognize the themes and then recognize that you have to respond to how your work intersects with that theme, then you can start to figure out where you need to position yourself and what protections you need to put in place for your users as well as your organization in order to navigate that. That's why I call it navigating the edge, because it's a static thing.
Right. The edge is there. So last week on the show, we talked about marketing innovation.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about guardrails and we're talking about the edge, the question that's in my brain is, does innovation exist within the guardrails, or does it only exist outside of the guardrails?
Innovation has to exist everywhere, because I have to figure out what kind of fence am I putting up? Am I putting up chain link, or am I making a concrete, barrier? Is it going to be slightly porous? Is it not? Is it going to be a matter of this cliff can handle the weight of, 10,000 people, but not 20? So we as ethicists, we can, and it's one of the flexibilities that we have, because we're not law. Law is generally narrowly construed and narrowly constrained. It has to be so that it can catch particular people and not accidentally catch a bunch of people you didn't intend to catch or hold accountable to. Ethics has more freedom than that. We understand how law works. As a matter of fact, a ridiculous amount, like 75% of philosophers that apply to law school get accepted. We have the skills. We apply them differently. So when it comes to figuring out how we're going to set this up for safety or privacy or those kinds of things, we have to be willing to innovate, because you know what? The technology is going to innovate around us. And then suddenly the guardrails that we create aren't going to work anymore. And then we're going to have to make more or come up with different ones, to use our construction analogy, different materials or different, it's at nighttime, glow in the dark, whatever it takes. But if my job is safety, now I have to figure out what safe means based on what the latest thing is somebody else did, or even the latest thing that somebody else did that broke something that had been working just fine. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes you release something into what I call the wild, which is us, and it works just fine. But then 6 months later, people figure out how to break it, or they figured out how to mess with it. And now what was once okay isn't okay, even after deployment. So now we have to come in after the fact and do cleanup of that while we're still working on what the cleanup is going to be for the next iteration coming forward. This is always going to be dynamic. And the ethicists need to be as dynamic as the developers and the technology and the users and the hackers and the people who are, looking to not do good things. That's why strategy is such a huge part of AI ethics. It's because you have to triangulate all those pieces and parts and then still try to give good advice and guidance, knowing all the parts are moving.
Right. Okay. So this kind of brings me back to something you mentioned in your intro about how ethics is logic, that we use logic to figure out these things. And from a marketing perspective, I see a lot of not logic. The reason why this show exists, because I see a lot of crazy, stupid things and not logical things. And I think that alignment is really interesting, because I think, again, like you said with the developers, I don't think most people are going out there to be like, how can I destroy society today? Yes. I don't think a lot of marketers are out to, one, do bad things, but two, to do like unproductive things. I don't think
so either.
Go to work and be like, let's spend 8 hours doing things.
Let's exploit our mailing list.
Right.
Right. This is, most no people ever. Let's hope, no one listening here. Yeah.
And if that's you, you might want to turn the show off. not for you. But how do you find we bring this logic back into the conversation? Because I feel like we've got into the society of immediate gratification and people are just like tick, 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 do things. And I feel like we're not creating as much space as maybe we used to for logic and slowing down and thinking. So how, from an ethics perspective, have you seen people kind of bring that back into conversation and make sure that they're being intentional in that arena?
Well, I was going to say, for most people outside of ethics, it's easier to think of it as critical thinking. So if you're going to, consider, I don't know, monetizing your mailing list, you're going to monetize it. You're going to find a way to do it. You're going to make a list that's sellable. You're going to do something like that. Okay. First of all, you can sit there and go, okay, they gave us this information, but when they gave us this information, did we specifically ask them if we could sell it?
Right.
Okay, some of them we did, some of them we didn't. Okay, now we have an A/B list. Those we did and those we didn't. Now we have to kind of set aside those we didn't, or we have to at least ask them. Or at least, and I would recommend asking them, not just publishing a change in our policy that now says if we have it, we're selling it. That's no. Because you wouldn't like it. Look, it's not a popularity contest, but sometimes when we put ourselves in that context, we get some revelations. And then sometimes when we try to say we're okay with it, like I'd be fine with it. I love my company. Yeah, I'll let them sell anything. Sure. Yeah. Like, okay. Do you think 5,000 people on the street would agree with you if they had no dealings with your company?
Right.
If the answer starts changing, you have work to do. Like asking them, hey, if you renew on this date or at your renewal date, if you renew for our services, sign up for a newsletter, whatever, we will sell this we reserve the right to. If you don't want us to, tell us. So many people are afraid of asking the question because they're afraid that they won't get the answer that they want. But actually asking the question is more likely to get you the answer that you want. And that when you do get the answer, you'll be likely to be in less trouble if you do the thing that you wanted to do, if you've just been upfront about it and not on the down low about it. Right. So instead of being like, well, let's hope they don't notice that we changed the fine print. Instead, you're like, you know what? Hey, you know what? It's 2024. AI has gone crazy. We need to do different things with the information that you share with us. We want to be upfront about what our policies are. These are the changes that we've made. And by the way, here's shorthand, regular person speak version of what those changes are so that everyone can understand what those are.
Right.
Now, do you want to say yes or no? That seems so much better than waking up one day and not realizing the policy changed 2 years ago. And now you're trying to remember what all you shared with them and where it went and how's it being used and all of that kind of stuff.
And now to get your data out of it, you have to go through a whole big process and mail the director of privacy.
I was going to say, and then that's another thing. If you previously said yes, but you would like to say no, picture this. Please fax us the following form or mail it to the following P.O. box number. And we will make sure that we review your change. And if we approve your change, it'll take place in 6 months from now. Guys, come on. Would you like that if that was you? Would your friends like it if you did that to them? You know what? You're relying on your clients for your income, for your business, for your future business. That's not going to help you long term.
Right.
So we need to be thinking about those kinds of things. And it's not just that. There's this concept in AI that marketing uses quite a bit where we call it a nudge. There are little cookies boxes where it says, accept all cookies, deny all cookies, and, get bumped from the website. Those two options.
Yeah.
That's not really a nudge. That's kind of a hammer.
Right.
But if you've looked, a few websites are now starting to say essential cookies, optional cookies, or none. You mean I don't have to try to figure out what cookies are, what they mean, what they do, which things mean what, and everything else. And I can just say, you know what, just the bare minimum essential stuff. Oh, I feel better. I feel like they saw me. Yay. And it's a simple thing.
Mhm.
But so many times we'll set up choice structure, especially in marketing and sales. We'll set up choice structure. So like our preferred choice is the obvious one.
Mhm.
You know which one we want you to click. You know which one we want you to click. So you're going to click that one, right? But a true choice, a true nudge allows for flexibility for somebody to say no.
Mhm.
It allows people autonomy and choice and some control over their presence, their interaction with you, and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
You can make an argument why that's not beneficial.
You can make an argument about anything.
But I could make an argument back explaining why it would be beneficial not, or why it wouldn't be beneficial to do that, because people who feel like they have an upfront, healthy, above board relationship with you want to continue to have a relationship with you. The more subversive, down low, kind of sneak it under the radar kind of stuff. In 2024, especially on LinkedIn, people are copying policies that have changed. People are copying policies that have changed and are saying this policy has changed and putting it up on LinkedIn for everyone to see. There really is no, in 2024, down low. There really isn't. So if you're still relying on that stuff, you're going to run into a problem because there's also a lot less tolerance for the down low.
Mhm.
People are tired. We're burned out. We just want to know the answer. We want to know what you're going to do. We'll make a good decision about it. We promise we'll do it. If we want to do business with you, we'll be as lenient as we can. But could you just be upfront with me?
Right. Well, I think that's the thing. I've always made me curious about the marketing is that it is what I would consider underhanded. Right? If you were proud about making this decision, why couldn't you tell your users?
Well, wouldn't you tell everyone you're a marketer? Wouldn't you put them on blast? Stand from the rooftop, Hey.
And if you're not that proud of it, why did you make that decision?
Right. And why did you do it at midnight on a Friday? And we all know that end of day Friday is the horrible news cycle. We all know how these patterns work. Mm-hmm. So we recognize when other things start fitting those patterns too. But we're also starting to recognize, hey, this feels different. Hey, they told me this time. Hey, there's 3 cookie boxes. Wait, which site was that? I need to remember that.
Right.
We're starting to, as consumers, because this stuff is getting much more out there, and because ethics is being spoken about a lot more, people are becoming aware of ethics. People are using the word more than I've heard them use the word in the last decade. I've never been so excited in my life because it's people in marketing are like, hey, let's do marketing ethics. I'm like, because it does affect us in every area of our life. It really does, in our relationships, in our privacy, especially with technology. And there's so many things people are going to be able to harvest now from the amount of data that they can get, and the fact that large data companies want to scrape everything that they can. And as I've said in some other talks, we're essentially the products now. We might as well just be a walking billboard for all the brands that we use. Because when you go online and you see our online presence, you're able to construct me in billboards. So people didn't really consent to being products in that way, or to be a walking billboard in that way. So once you realize that that's what's going on, there's suddenly this uncomfortable thing of how did we end up here, and how do I stop myself from ending up there again? There's a lot of fear with AI because of all the talk about it being world ending and cataclysmic, and it's going to start, emulating humans and take over the world, and those kinds of conversations where, yes, in the absolute worst hands, under the worst case scenarios, of the worst of the worst of the worst, we should keep an eye on that and make sure that doesn't happen. But in the day-to-day, we have problems right in front of us right now that deserve our attention. And how we treat others that our business interacts with, that we interact with, matters most of all. Because a lot of us, I think, have felt taken for granted far too long, or that our actions have been presumed far too long. You've always done business with us, so you always will. It's changing. It really is. And COVID brought about a lot of that with our online purchases and our purchase patterns, where we now wanted a more personal experience, but we somehow don't want you to necessarily harvest every detail about our lives. And yet those things are related. In order to give you a more personalized experience, you do have to be more forthcoming online and allow more information to be harvested about you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's striking that balance. And part of that's going to come from knowing your people. And as you pointed out in the video at the beginning, understanding your brand. Mm-hmm. Who are you going to be in this AI world with regard to that and to the people that you service? What is that going to look like? Mm-hmm. And how are we going to nudge them? And what is that going to look like? And, what are we going to do when it comes to digital marketing and our customer experiences? And, all of that speaks to your brand. How you respond to the people that find you is going to define you. So you have to take ethics into account and start asking themselves, what do they want? And what do they expect from me based on where the brand has been up until now? Mm-hmm. Because 180 brands are struggling, saying we're all this for this long, and then all of a sudden going, we're harvesting every single thing we can get, we didn't tell you, is a mismatch. Mm-hmm. And I think you would probably say, I'm going to let you have a chance to get a word in here, but I think you would probably say that consistency, or at least meeting expectations as behaving in alignment, matters, even as change occurs. Mm-hmm. Suddenly becoming somebody new or flipping yourself inside out is kind of weird for the people on the other side.
Yeah, and it breaks trust. Yeah. So like you're behaving this way for X amount of time, and then all of a sudden you flipped. It makes me wonder, what do you really believe? Do you believe in doing it that old way, or do you believe in doing it this way? Because I was aligned with the old version of that, but I'm not aligned with the new version of that. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with a new contact earlier today about some companies recently, big companies, who have pivoted from a marketing perspective, but it has started to have the fans of the brand ask questions. So my example, and this is from a while back now, but I'm a big Disney fan. Mm-hmm. And when Disney mandated everybody to go back to work because they needed to be in person to be creative, and this is all about creativity, my brain, who I also identify as being about creativity, was like, well, if you were really being creative, couldn't you have come up with a way to be creative remotely? Yes. Like, this doesn't seem like you're being creative. This seems like you're being corporate. And so it while it might seem like a little thing, for fans of the brand who are fans because of their belief that Disney can create anything, right, was like, what? That doesn't seem to match. And likewise, recently, I use Apple as an example all the time, right? Because Apple did an amazing job of creating a community around innovation and first movers and being connected. And apparently their newest line of ads is related to the product benefits. So the length of battery power and things like that. And people are like, but I never cared about that. I know that my phone is going to expire after 2 years because you're going to create a new operating system that kills it. That's not why I'm part of this brand. I'm part of this brand because of this experience. And I don't think that people think about it that this is why, again, I see this as a good example of the ethics, because this is not about saying that it's wrong for you to promote product benefits, right? Like, you jumped off the edge of the cliff because now you're promoting product benefits. No, that's not the point. But it's also not in alignment with, from the consumer's perspective, of what you would do.
Yes.
So now I'm confused. And now my confusion leads to a whole bunch of questions about my relationship with your brand.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if either of these companies, one, did these things intentionally, or even had someone asking them the questions about, like, this might be perceived as this if we do that. And sometimes it's just because we don't have enough people in our lives asking good questions, which is something else that you mentioned earlier, asking the right questions, which reminds me of iRobot as well. You must ask the right questions.
That is true.
But if we're not asking questions, we're also not asking questions outside of the realm of what we would normally ask questions about, like what's the revenue of this, what's the ROI, what's the blah blah business things,
right?
If we're not looking at the, well, what might people think about this,
and can we have hits, because intuitively you can get hits that something has gone awry if you hear that and they're like, so we came up with our with our latest ad promotion, and check out these cool benefits of the latest whatever, and it's Apple, and you're like, and you see a bunch of people in the audience do what you and I did, which was like, that's already a sign that something didn't resonate. I mean, if you reached out to talk with me and we had an entire talk and ethics didn't come up anywhere, you'd end up the call and you'd be like, was she possessed? What happened? Like, where did she go? Like, what's the deal? Like, did she sell out? What happened? Like, I don't know. I'll accept her being an artist better than I'll accept, like, what was that? But we have to make sure that we don't cause our clients and our business partners to just sit around scratching their heads wondering who the heck they're doing business with these days, and that doesn't work for customers. It doesn't work for business partners. It doesn't work for founding relationships, because like you said, and trust is a big part of ethics. If you break somebody's trust, they're a lot more leery of you moving forward, even if they agree to move forward, or they might start looking at their plan Bs, or they could be starting to, explore other options and, those kinds of things. Just small note about trustworthy. When generally in technology, when you hear that something is trustworthy, generally speaking, you have to ask the question. Generally speaking, what they mean is that the AI performs according to its data set and its expectations. It does not mean necessarily trust in the way that people outside of development would use the word trust. Like, oh, I can trust it and it'll do good things. And like, it won't ever get anything wrong. And that was one of the big problems that we had with ChatGPT when it first came out. Is it's supposed to be trustworthy AI, and it technically is, but it still can hallucinate and totally make things up out of thin air. It's trustworthy because the stuff it's making up is still tied to its data set.
Right.
So be careful when you hear that word trust, and make sure you know exactly what kind of trust they're talking about. Does that mean that people have been pleased with it? Does that mean that not just that people have been pleased with it, but is it accurate? Is it those kinds of things? Not just does it conform only to its data set, because those are two very different questions. So that's just a note with people using similar words, but they can mean very different things. And if you think it means the other definition and it doesn't, you're also likely to find yourself disappointed. And I will say this as an artist, because I started in fine art and graphic design. I was actually a fine art major. I was going to be an art teacher. Took some philosophy classes as an elective, because like any good artist, I was going to let my mind play as well as my hands while I was working. Car accident knocked me out of school. So I moved into graphic design because I could still do that. I injured my left arm and I'm left-handed. So a keyboard allowed me to accomplish things that I couldn't do necessarily with a brush and stuff. Moved into graphic design, still had a love of philosophy, started doing DEI projects, open your mind, gender, race, and age kinds of gender, race, and age kind of projects. And then put myself back into school and got 2 degrees in philosophy and presented internationally on ethics, because it was all related. But what I will tell you is, back in the day, one of my favorite art professors was formerly of Parsons in New York. Okay. And when I got hurt in my car accidents, I asked her, and this ties to your Disney story, I remember going to meet her as my academic advisor, and I told her my art was gone. And she looked at me and she kind of laughed and she said, why would it be gone? I said, my hand doesn't work. And like, that's where it comes out. Hey, and she's like, what made you think your art was ever in your hand? And I just kind of looked at her and I was like, generally that's where it comes out. Like that was, I was young. That was my answer, and she's like, you either have a creative mind or you don't. And if you have a creative mind, your creative work, whatever it is, will come out of you one way or another. So to the lovely people at Disney who thinks that, being creative is impossible for home, almost all of us who have ever been creative have managed to figure out how to be creative while working from home. My studio was in my basement for a good number of years. I didn't have a separate studio. I just kind of went downstairs where the concrete was and made a mess. Trust me, if you want people to be creative and they're creative people, they'll find a way, because you can't shut off that creativity. It turns out when I majored in philosophy and I went back and I told her, like, I think I'm a philosopher now. And she looks at me and she said, it's still a creative mind. Mm-hmm. It just depends what's going to come out.
Yeah.
So it can be ideas or concepts, or it can be gesture drawings. Good news is a creative mind gets to pick. So I picked. And I still do art and photography for fun. So I still get the best of both. Mm-hmm. But so far as creativity, no, you're not limited by space. You're not limited by time. If you give somebody a napkin and a pen and they're an artist, they'll have a sketch before, the waitress appears or waiter appears with your food. It just, I know many people who do developing, they're writing code on scraps of napkins. I know artists sketching on scraps of napkins. Even me as a philosopher, I'm outlining papers on scraps of napkins. Where there's a will, there's a way. And artists, developers, and creative thinkers always seem to have the will to find a way. Yeah. I wish there was more faith in that.
Well, and this is a great point. And I do, before we jump into the next thing, I want to remind all of our viewers that are watching that if you do have a question along the lines of marketing ethics, please ask it, because we would love to answer any questions that you have. I think the whole concept of the creative mind, especially talking about marketing, is very interesting, because I think a lot of times when people think about creativity, they're thinking about a visualization. And so they think about things like logos, they think about brand colors, they think about those types of things from a marketing perspective. And similarly to we were talking about marketing innovation last week, is that this really is about having a creative mind and asking questions. And we touched on a couple of times about asking the right questions. How do we know what are the right questions? And do we need to go through some of the wrong questions before we get to the right questions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the idea of asking questions is usually you start with the easy ones that you know the answers to. That's usually the easiest way to get started. Is, you don't sit down and decide I'm going to paint the Mona Lisa. You hope you can, kind of figure out how to do a curved line and some shading. So you got to start with the basic stuff. So feel free to start with the stuff. What is the good stuff this thing is going to do? What made me want to develop this to begin with? What made me think that, my customers or my clients would respond to this if you're in marketing? You start with the easy stuff and you'll end up with a list. It'll be easy. You'll be like, well, it's going to do this and it's going to do this. And we got this kind of data back. So we know that they want this kind of information and we're going to give it to them this way. We have a list. Okay. Then you can start asking yourself, okay, how can this go wrong? Where's the message likely to miss? Where would I lose them in this? What thing might put them off? What might make them hesitate? What are those kinds of things? Now, is there something about the original idea that I can change to address those things? Now you kind of have a new idea because you've improved it. Now you ask yourself those same questions again. What are the good things? What do I think this will do? What do I think this will accomplish? I can cross these negative things off the first list. I can move them to the good list now. That kind of thing. Using good in ways philosophers wouldn't, but we'll roll with it. But you figure out those kinds of things and then you play devil's advocate with it again. Where is it going to go wrong? How could I lose people? Who do I think I'm most likely to lose? Can I get more specific about this uncomfortable tension I've discovered? Like, where is it coming from? Who's likely to feel it? Is it everybody's? It's some people. And by the way, if it's some people, are they in protected groups? Are they in disenfranchised groups? Are they in under-recognized groups? Because if they are, we absolutely need to kick it back and go do it again. And reiterate again. And we can do that with technology. We can do it with marketing. We can do it with advertising. We can do it with anything. But generally, start with the wins first because you're most familiar with them. Asking somebody, I don't know, something basic like, I want to get a makeover. I wonder how my hair should be, or I want to redo the house, or I wanted to do a different kitchen. Well, what do you like about the one that you have now? Okay. After you do the list of the likes. Okay. Now what's the stuff that annoys you? That drawer right there. That drawer drives me nuts. It's big, it's great, but it's not organized and there's no way to divide it. That drawer drives me crazy. The drawer gets added to the list. What else? Okay, the pan lids are always everywhere. Okay, note to self. Tupperware, why did we ever invent this? It's like Satan, I don't know. Tupperware storage gets added to the list, or maybe just put it in a fire, that kind of thing. You start figuring that stuff out.
I feel like certain age demographics all have that Tupperware lid drawer where you have all the lids are in the same drawer, but you have no way of.
Right. How about we design you a kitchen with no junk drawer? Like, I will fight you for my junk drawer. But not only that, but when I go to put the big pot under the faucet in the sink, I always hit the faucet while I'm trying to get it under it. So maybe a taller faucet would be good. Suddenly, once you start thinking that way, you can lean into that kind of thinking, and you can suddenly make it a lot more tangible, where it's not now like, okay, ideas and questions. Why is the sky blue? It's, I don't want to hit the faucet with a freaking pan. I want to be able to put a big, tall pot in the sink and fill it up with water. I want to have a separate place to rinse vegetables. I want to make sure that the garbage disposal works. I want a fancy dishwasher. I hate ovens that are regular. I want one in the wall. You start suddenly getting it. Now, imagine those things, but they're based on the preferences of your users and your customers. And imagine the kinds of insights you can buy, or the kinds of insights you can understand, and how much credibility that'll buy you when you try to answer them and address them in the work that you put forward. So immediately their brain is like, well, what about this? And they've answered it in the very next thing. And they're like, oh, well, that was nice. I guess I don't have to worry about that. And then it's like, yeah, but I bet you that's, this, they're going to do that. And then the next thing goes, oh, and they're not going to do that. Oh, wait. Then suddenly they're responding to what you did because you considered them in the process. So ethics is it's got all sorts of different elements of different things, everything from design thinking to ethics as far as rights protection and privacy and respect and bias and transparency and trust and all of those good things. And if you're using technology, it's well built on top of all of those other considerations. And now you're starting to put together like this incredible mountain of trust that says, not only do I see you, I'm not trying to get you to bypass those things. I want to try to solve those things for you. I don't want to try to create something flashy that makes you ignore that those things are a problem. I want to acknowledge that we all have a Tupperware drawer that drives us nuts, or some kinds of Tupperware that drives us crazy, or the cookie sheets, or the pan lids, some combination. And I want you to know that I know that, and that I recognize that as a challenge, and we're working on it. Even if we don't have the perfect bulletproof solution, it's transparent and it feels like it resonates a lot more. At the end of this talk, people are going to remember more about my kitchen than they're going to remember about me. But that's actually helpful because that'll make them remember the other things. So anytime we can lean in, we do a better job.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing that I think when people think about big marketing, I think about Super Bowl ads and things like that, we don't remember that all of these things are still based on some mostly random similarity that a consumer has with whatever you put into your ad.
Yes. And that's why the Budweiser commercials with the little puppies make us all go, oh, because we've all seen little puppies. And we've all seen, animals and, all kind of looked at really cool horses and things like that.
I used to have a golden retriever puppy. And so it's just like, oh.
Right? You see it, you're like, oh, and the puppy's waiting. And oh, we all have these smushy. I have not yet seen an animal video that I do not show my husband and go, oh, we need one, so they can tap that. And that's where the magic is. They're not trying to pretend that none of us have Tupperware that we can't find the lids for, or the bottoms for, or that they got deformed in the dishwasher, but we're still holding on to them because it's the right
we should keep the lid because the lid is still good, even though it doesn't fit it.
We'll find something it'll fit eventually, But we're not trying to pretend that that's not true. Imagine if the next Tupperware commercial you saw was a person in their pantry chucking out Tupperware containers with one lid in their hand, and you see them do nothing but try to fit it on 10 different containers. And then they say, our Tupperware, one lid fits all. It just gets deeper, but it's the same size. Do you know how many people would be like, that right
That's what I've always been waiting for.
Like, let me organize your cookie. It's Merry Christmas. Everybody's going to bake a dozen, 3 dozen cookies, and it's cookie sheet craziness. When you can see your customers as yourself and still see them, magic happens. Mm-hmm. When you fail to see them as them and fail to see them as you, it doesn't work nearly as well.
Yeah.
But once you put those two things together, where I say, I see you in me, and I see me in you, and the crazy Tupperware, we get good things. Yeah. But we need to do that in all the things that we build, whether it's technology, whether it's an ad campaign, whether it's a marketing push, whatever it is. We need to make sure that we don't lose track of you or me. Because in the end, it's by you for me by you.
Right.
That me and you part has to work. Mm-hmm. That's the job.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Okay. So I'm going to do final calls for questions, and I want to make sure I'm being clear with this. If you have a question, type it in the comments, and I will read it and we will answer it. Just because there's some questions about how to ask a question. Type it in the comments, and then we will read it and we'll answer for you. This is something I think about a lot of times from the marketing perspective, because I think there's a lot of focus on us from a marketing perspective. So I work on my brand, and I work on my colors, and I work on my brand guidelines, and I work on all of these things that are me. And then I go out to market and I do market research, and that's all about you.
Right.
That's the you stuff I'm doing for marketing. This is the me stuff I'm doing for marketing. But we forget about the us stuff.
Yes, because we push the me stuff to the them stuff.
Right. Or like, those them said they want to see this us stuff. So I'll show them that us stuff, that me stuff, but I'm not actually creating any us stuff.
Yes.
And so when I think about ethics and the logic and the questions that come into this from a marketing perspective, a lot of this is the area where we have opportunity to ask questions. Is are we looking for ways to find us? What is an us? Who do we even want as part of an us?
Yes.
It
can't be everybody and anybody and everything.
Right. We're just going to, now I'm thinking about it from like a software development perspective, but like, I'm not going to develop we just use ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT was like, there are people who want an assistant in creating things, right? Yes. Code, content, things. So we're going to give them that. Yes. Is that what all people want? No. Are there like a million use cases now for ChatGPT? Yes. And that's because there was an original influx of people that were like, okay, we are here to use this exactly how you have created it to be used. Right. And then there's a second group of people who say, oh, that's interesting. Could use it for this. Right. And then you start to build and build. But there's always that original group of people, okay, that you have created something for. And whether you're creating a technology or you're thinking about using a specific technology for a marketing perspective to have conversations with those people or to target those types of people, the reason is important. And one of the biggest drivers behind the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show is in people not knowing their reason for choosing a thing. And if you are, now I'm going back to the like Cliffs of Moher example in my head where like I'm standing safely behind the barrier, which to be fair is like a rickety wood fence. It's not like a super secure something. And my father-in-law standing, I don't know, a foot from the edge. And me thinking, I would never do that.
Right.
But also I accept that people are doing that. And so we have this, it's like we were talking about creativity and how you want to play with your brain, like you want to play with your hands, right? Like it's like playing with your brain. What questions are you asking?
Yes.
And like, so let's finish on this because we have 5 minutes left, Laura.
Yes.
In terms of, I think kind of where we started the conversation is, how have you seen businesses, tech companies, anybody else that you've worked with, even students, create space to ask these questions, create the practice, because this is a practice, right? We have to get into the practice of doing it.
Well, I was going to say that's the main thing is you have to have an opportunity to practice. And one of the challenges with practicing is it's better to do it with somebody who knows how to do it. Because we can tell when you're like, no, you're still sticking to the safe questions. No, you didn't ask the hard question. You realize those 2 questions led you to this question, and you skipped it and you went to the easy one again. You know, that kind of a thing. But that's why philosophy is something that can be taught, but must be learned. Mm-hmm. It's not something we do by default. So one of the things that we can start doing is, you know, I know people don't like meetings. They don't. But you can still meet up for somebody for coffee and a break during a day and just play let me play 20 questions with you. What did I miss? Did I miss anything? You know, tomorrow, why don't you play 20 questions with me? You know, but it can't just be any 20 questions. You actually need like a project it's focused on with an actual goal, with things that you're working towards, because if not, then you're just kind of having a tense Christmas dinner. And, you know, philosophers.
I'm thinking of the like 20 questions.
Philosophers can make any holiday meal awkward. So we're not aiming for awkward Thanksgiving where now Aunt Sally isn't talking to you. We're not going for that. But instead, actual questions about real situations that you can sink your teeth into. You know, when I have people do this, I have them start with, believe it or not, current events. So, you know, the latest article said that, you know, I read one that said that ChatGPT is actually a court's being petitioned to have it abandon its nonprofit charter. Okay. What do we think the benefits would be for ChatGPT to keep its nonprofit charter? What do we think how do we think the investors would react? How do we think the users would react? How do we think that, you know what I mean? How would it feel if chat became another one of the, you know, kind of tech companies like the other big 4 or 5, you know, like what would that look like? What do we think that would do for the brand? Do you think it would change the trust? You see, if you start sticking with something that you actually, both people can have the same information on. So if it's a news article, you read this one, I read the same one. Then we start doing devil's advocate with it and challenging each other on what we say. Well, I don't really think it'll be a problem with trust. I mean, look at how many people are using ChatGPT. Okay, but it does seem like part of their identity was tied to this nonprofit. What is it going to do to their identity if the nonprofit goes away? See, that's starting to make the question a little bit more nuanced. Then it can become, how do we think we could double down on trust if they do lose the nonprofit part? What would that look like? And then you can start practicing questions, but you need somebody who's kind of nosy, kind of ornery, and willing to kind of fight back. And you need a similar situation to start from where you both know the same things. That's why current events, everybody reads the same article. You're not allowed to pull any information into the conversation other than what's in the article. So you literally have to work with what you've got, because sometimes, and you know this in marketing, you don't always get all the information that you need. Sometimes you just get some, and you have to turn that some into a narrative, into a story, into a next campaign, and you have to figure out how you're going to flesh that out with making as few jumps as humanly possible, because we don't want to make assumptions if we don't have to. So you can really practice that way. I find current events to be the way that my students learn best, the way even my mom and I can actually have philosophical philosophical conversations that way for anybody who wants, to send some sympathy. My mother is an accountant and my dad is in systems tech. And somehow they have a philosopher. They're confused too. So we're all good. But when I talk about current events, even the most fastidious 2 + 2 = 4 people start really doing ethics hard. And my mom can, but I have to give her brass tacks and say, look, this is what we're dealing with. This is what we know. These are the variables. This is the situation. Now, what do you think about this? And she can smash it. So even the people you wouldn't think could do it, they really can. And honestly, ethics and math aren't really that far apart when you're using logic. So it's kind of interesting, but then you need that little wild artistic side in there that can really help you pull ideas that other people haven't thought of,
right,
out of it.
Right.
And
I think this is a really great opportunity for marketers too, especially if you're considering the use of AI in your marketing program. There's articles on the daily about AI and different features of it and different things it's doing. And what if you took that to your next marketing meeting and said, okay, we know as a team we've been exploring what AI could do for us. Here's one article. Let's talk about it. Let's ask some questions. Let's explore and help the team practice those types of skills. So then we probably don't have to have, eventually, because we'll have the skills, we won't have to have a meeting that's specifically about practicing those skills. We'll be able to use those skills in real time as we're exploring solutions and as we're exploring product upgrades or new channels or whatever it might be. We have those skills. So I love that as a takeaway, Laura, because I think it's a very easy thing that everybody can do. I would be kind of terrified to do that with my own mom personally, but
yeah, well, she's used to me, so we're good. She had to raise me, so she kind of got, she did some years hard time there. I will say one thing before we go. If you are going to use AI, please be aware that it can hallucinate. It does make mistakes. It's really not great at math. We taught it how to talk like we talk. We don't often sit around and talk about calculus. Be very careful if you give it a bunch of math to do. Make sure you check any information that it gives you, because somebody else could have used it in their campaign and chat won't necessarily tell you.
Right.
So you really do, if you're going to embrace AI for this, you really do have to kick the tires. But you are also one of the best groups positioned to give it a good, really good kind of college try. You know what I mean? You're really uniquely positioned to, it does creative stuff best. So it can help you pull out those kind of ideas and those kinds of patterns that you wouldn't necessarily recognize on your own. It's one of the things that it does best. What I would be hesitant to tell you to do, and I would tell you not to do, is don't copy paste. Just think of the ideas, make your own notes, ruminate on them, and go from there. But I couldn't get through a whole topic on AI and not be like, everybody be careful, everybody. And also be really careful, because there's a lot of creatives like me out there whose work is used in a data set that we didn't have consent for, that you can use to create ads, promotions, marketing, videos, all kinds of things. And I got no say, no compensation, no vote. So part of doing ethics is also recognizing that sometimes the tools that we want to use that can make it easier on one front, but if they make many other people's jobs more difficult, we still have to pause and then really start asking those questions about, is this something that I should and want to do? So be very mindful of that copy paste, because that thing can get you in trouble. And the way that technology is moving and PR, someone will figure out where the original source is, and then they will post it on LinkedIn. So be careful.
This is why it's safest to create unique content, folks.
It is safest to create unique content, but if you want to brainstorm, get ideas, have stuff to think about, it is a great place to get that, especially for marketing. You guys are one of the lucky ones. By the way, philosophy, not so good. Marketing, much solid ground. So
and this is the thing, right? From a marketing perspective, this is what we're selling. What are the types of questions people are asking online about this thing? It's great. It. Right? And then tell the people what you think about that. Because that's what differentiates you. And this is people who follow me, they've heard me say this a lot too. You don't know that they're not giving that exact same information to another person who's going to copy.
I was going to say that's the same thing. Is 100,000 of you can get the same answer,
right?
So if you really want to stand out, you have to take that answer if you want to use it, or you think there's something there, and make it unique and make it uniquely yours. And as a creative individual, you know exactly how to do that. Don't doubt yourself just because technology figured something out. That doesn't mean that your skills or your value isn't there, and don't let somebody else tell you that it's not there. If they're like, oh, we could have ChatGPT do what you do, you'll be like, only if you want all of our competitors to do the exact same thing. Or if you want us to do
what I say
with our competitors.
Pretty sure my entire brain wasn't used in the data set for ChatGPT, but just saying.
But like I said, ideas, brainstorming, lists, organization, those are good uses for it. And to quote your original idea where you said, like there's that one group that it was created for. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. ChatGPT was created as a beta test. It was never supposed to be the final product. That's why it's had the glitches that it's had, and it's got some of the challenges it's had, because somebody saw a way to profit it, and all of a sudden it became the product when it was just supposed to be a beta test and then re-released later with improvements. Instead, we're working with the beta and then they're improving it as we go. So if you want to know who the original people for ChatGPT were, it really wasn't us. And isn't that kind of wild?
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing that I would like. These conversations allow us to explore, right? Yeah. So some of these things, you can consume anything on the internet, folks. The number of garage door opening and closing videos that exist on YouTube is shocking. My son has watched all of them, by the way. But there's something. So you can find information about stuff. But is that what you would do? And so this is the question I leave with you all today from the ethics perspective. Is there's lots of things that can be done. There's lots of things other people are doing. Is that what you would do? And
should do.
Explore around that and find out where your ethical edge is. I really like the concept of that. Laura, if people would like to dive into philosophical conversations with you some more, where's the best place for them to find you to do that?
LinkedIn is always a great place, or my website, which is nextgenethics.com. You can find me either place, but I respond to LinkedIn, accept friend requests, DMs, you name it. If you find me, well, you'll find an answer from me.
There you go. That's what I always say too. So connect everyone, because this conversation, marketing ethics, likely not something you're just going to doodle around in your own brain and figure out. Get into the conversation, get some people who are used to pushing the boundaries on the hard questions, asking you the hard questions so that you can do the things that matter. And at the end of the day, we can do marketing all a little bit more ethically. Thank you, Laura, for joining us today. You shared so much great insights. Thank you, everybody, for joining us live. Thanks to anybody who's joined in for the replay. If you are watching the replay and you have any questions as well, pop them in the comments. I will see them. I will share them with Laura. We'll come back with some answers for you. So it's never too late to ask a question, especially about marketing ethics. Okay, with that, everybody, take care. And until next time, permission to do you.